Welcome to my books and story time by mybooksummary.com. Let's explore. At the heart of Sense and Sensibility lies the delicate balance between reason and emotion, between the quiet restraint of sense and the fiery abandon of sensibility. Jane Austen weaves this tale around two sisters, Elinor and Marianne Dashwood, whose contrasting personalities shape their experiences of love, loss, and social expectations. Against the backdrop of early 19th century England, where a woman's fortune was often tied to marriage, the Dashwood sisters navigate the complexities of romance and financial uncertainty. This story is not just about love. It is about the sacrifices one makes, the heartbreaks that shape a person, and the quiet strength needed to endure society's rigid expectations. Let's walk through the novel in detail, experiencing every emotion that Austen so brilliantly captured. Chapter 1. A Sudden Misfortune. The Dashwood family had always known a comfortable life at Norland Park, their grand estate in Sussex. The family consisted of Mr. and Mrs. Dashwood and their three daughters. Elinor, the eldest, whose calm and rational nature set her apart. Marianne, the middle daughter, brimming with passion and strong emotions. And Margaret, the youngest, still too young to be entangled in matters of the heart. When Mr. Dashwood suddenly passed away, the family's future was thrown into uncertainty. Under the laws of inheritance, Norland Park was passed down to his son from a previous marriage, John Dashwood. Though Mr. Dashwood had asked his son to look after his stepmother and half-sisters, John's wife, Fanny, had other plans. She quickly convinced him that his promise did not require him to offer them significant financial support. Thus, Mrs. Dashwood and her daughters found themselves unwelcome in their own home. They were forced to seek a more modest living elsewhere, stripping them of the comfort they had always known. Chapter 2. A New Home and New Faces. Luckily, the Dashwoods were offered a cottage at Barton Park, owned by a distant relation, Sir John Middleton. Though much smaller than Norland, the cottage offered them peace and independence. Sir John, a cheerful and sociable man, welcomed them warmly. He frequently invited them to dine at his grand estate, where they met his talkative mother-in-law, Mrs. Jennings, and Colonel Brandon, a reserved and thoughtful bachelor in his mid-30s. Marianne, who valued passionate love above all, found Colonel Brandon dull and unromantic. At 35, she considered him far too old for love. She openly dismissed any idea of a match between them, believing in a love full of poetry and music, not quiet admiration and steadiness. Meanwhile, Elinor nursed a private sorrow. Back at Norland, she had quietly fallen in love with Edward Ferrars, Fanny's brother. Unlike his sister, Edward was kind, modest, and intelligent. Though their attachment was clear, Elinor knew his wealthy family would never approve of their match. Still, she carried hope in her heart. Chapter 3. Marianne's Romantic Idealism. One fateful day, Marianne took a walk on a rainy afternoon and slipped on a muddy hill, twisting her ankle. Just as she cried out in pain, a handsome young man rushed to her aid. He carried her home in his arms, an act of heroism that left her breathless. His name was John Willoughby. He was everything she dreamed of, charming, poetic, and passionate. The two were inseparable, spending their days reciting poetry and discussing music. Marianne, convinced she had met her soulmate, gave her heart freely. Everyone assumed they were secretly engaged, but no announcement was made. Elinor, ever cautious, worried that Marianne was being too reckless. Willoughby had not declared his intentions, yet Marianne behaved as if they were already married. But Marianne, driven by sensibility, believed love needed no restraint. Chapter 4. Heartbreak and Secrets. Just as suddenly as he arrived, Willoughby left. Without explanation, he told Marianne he had urgent business in London and disappeared. Marianne was devastated. Days turned into weeks and no letter came. At the same time, Elinor faced her own heartache. She learned that Edward Ferrars had been secretly engaged for years to a woman named Lucy Steele. Lucy was clever but manipulative, clinging to Edward despite knowing he had no real affection for her. Elinor was heartbroken but bore the pain silently. Unlike Marianne, she did not weep openly. She endured. Chapter 5. A London Season of Disillusionment. Mrs. Jennings invited the Dashwood sisters to spend the season in London. Marianne, eager to see Willoughby, agreed. believing he would finally declare his love. But when they arrived, she received a cruel shock. At a grand ball, she saw Willoughby across the room, standing beside a rich heiress, Miss Grey. Marianne confronted him, demanding answers. Coldly, Willoughby admitted he was engaged to Miss Grey. He had chosen wealth over love. Marianne was crushed. She fell into despair, barely eating or sleeping. Meanwhile, Elinor endured Lucy Steele's gloating about her engagement to Edward. Yet Elinor never let her pain show. Chapter 6. Redemption and Revelations. As Marianne sank into heartbreak, Colonel Brandon revealed Willoughby's true character. Willoughby had seduced and abandoned Brandon's young ward, Miss Eliza, leaving her pregnant and disgraced. The revelation shook Marianne. Her romantic hero was nothing more than a selfish opportunist. When they returned home, Marianne fell gravely ill. She hovered between life and death, forcing her to reflect. In her weakness, she realized how blind she had been. She had chased passion at the cost of sense. At the same time, Elinor learned that Edward's engagement to Lucy had been broken, because Lucy had instead married his wealthy younger brother. Edward, now free, rushed to Barton Cottage and declared his love for Elinor. After so much quiet suffering, Elinor finally allowed herself to weep with joy. Chapter 7. A Different Kind of Love. As Marianne recovered, she saw Colonel Brandon with new eyes. She had always dismissed him as dull, but she now saw his steady kindness, his devotion. Though she did not love him in the wild way she had once loved Willoughby, she found comfort in his presence. Over time, her feelings deepened. Elinor and Edward married, living in modest happiness. Marianne too married, choosing sense over fleeting passion. Colonel Brandon's love was steady, and Marianne grew to love him in return. Final thoughts. Austen's Sense and Sensibility is not just a love story. It is a lesson in balance. Marianne and Elinor's journeys teach us that love, untempered by reason, leads to heartbreak, while too much restraint can lead to missed opportunities. Marianne's arc reminds us that love is not just about excitement, but also about stability, respect, and trust. Elinor's quiet suffering teaches us the power of patience and inner strength. Ultimately, the novel celebrates growth. Marianne learns to balance emotion with reason, and Elinor allows herself to feel. Neither extreme is ideal. The true path lies somewhere in between. Conclusion. Sense and Sensibility remains one of Jane Austen's most beloved works, because it reflects the universal struggles of love, heartbreak, and resilience. Whether in the 19th century or today, we all wrestle with the balance between heart and mind. Through the Dashwood sisters, Austen reminds us that love is not about grand gestures or passionate declarations alone. It is about consistency, kindness, and shared values. And sometimes, the person we least expect to love is the one who will love us the most. Stay tuned for more enlightening content. Head over to www.mybooksummary.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share the magic with friends. And let's grow together through the power of books and interesting stories.